What's up guys, Meredith with ExtremeTerrain.com, and today we are checking out the Mammoth Rizeppa CV joint kit fitting all 2007 through 2018 JK Wranglers. Now if you've noticed that your drive shaft boot is ripped, you're flinging grease everywhere, or you have a full-blown failure with your drive shaft, this CV joint repair kit will be an affordable solution to that. Now the Rizeppa joint on the JK is probably one of the most failed components for a couple different reasons. Now one being, if you have a lift on your Wrangler and have not upgraded your drive shaft, the harder angle will wear out the boot over time and allow dirt and debris in, damaging the joint, especially if you're taking your Jeep off-road. Now it can also just fail due to normal wear and tear, but adding this, whether you have a lift kit or not, will bring back some life to your drive shaft and extend the life without replacing the whole thing. This joint will basically be one big bearing at the end of your drive shaft to allow it to articulate and move around comfortably while simultaneously spinning to keep your wheels moving. Now bearings don't like anything but grease, so if the boot rips over time, it can wear down the bearings and cause them to fail from things getting inside again, especially if you're going off-road. Now this will bring all of that function back to the joint, but also the boot. So this is going to help with that longer lifespan to preserve the life of the joint and your drive shaft and avoid the cost of replacing the whole thing. Now the joint housing, or the outside, is going to be made of a steel material and sandwich the joint in, protecting the ball bearings on the inside from the elements. Now the boot will protect the joint, made of a flexible rubber material to allow good movement to the system. And the joint is also super thick and heavy duty steel, and on the inside will move very well thanks to the ball bearings, multiple ball bearings, and low friction grease that is included in the kit. Now you're also getting all the OE style hardware, including all of the bolts, alignment plates, and gaskets, as well as the boot seal. This will be one of your most affordable options at around $120 for the kit. Now compared to other choices, this will keep it to the basics with a factory style option or factory style design, including everything that you need, and will be much more affordable than swapping out your drive shaft, which can be about triple the price at the minimum if you don't want to or if you don't need to. Now I think if you want a solid yet affordable fix to restore one of the most beat up components on your Jeep, then this is going to be a fantastic choice. Install will be at 2 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter and should take you about 2 hours to get the job done with the right tools and setup. And I do want to mention that this kit will come again with low friction grease, so make sure that you pack the joint very well before installation so you can have proper movement. Now speaking of the install, one of our customers here has put this on their JK and is going to walk you through what that process looks like step by step. So that's going to wrap it up for my review. Let's go ahead and get into the install.
All right, some of the tools that we're going to be using today include a dead blow hammer, a ball peen hammer. While this hammer is optional, I like this hammer, it helps out a lot, but feel free to use any kind of smaller head type of hammer like a ball peen. Some split ring pliers, needle nose pliers, traditional snip pliers, a 5/16 or 8mm hand wrench, a flathead screwdriver or a pry bar, some socket extensions, a socket swivel, any kind of adapter you may need for your socket set, 8mm socket, 15mm socket, a number 6 Allen head key. This will be provided in the kit from Mammoth, some thread locker, an impact driver. If you don't have an impact driver, a standard hand ratchet will work. I prefer the impact driver, it moves a lot quicker. Bungee cord, various clean rags, and some gloves. The rags and the gloves just help with some of the grease control, as there are steps that do get pretty greasy with this. Today I'm going to be showing you how to replace the Rizeppa joint on a 2015 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited. So right now we are underneath the Jeep. If you have access to a vehicle lift, that is ideal and make it a lot easier, but I do not have access to one, and so I'm going to show you how to replace this without one, with the vehicle on the ground. It's going to be a little cramped, but it can be done. So like I said, we're already underneath the vehicle. We are near the front drive shaft, and right here we're going to start with the back end of the front drive shaft, removing it at the Rizeppa joint. So this is a Rizeppa joint right here. We're going to be removing the series of bolts that are around it, holding it on. So we're going to start with that. You're going to use your 8mm socket connected to all the extensions, and I have it connected to my impact driver. I'm basically going to start with the start with the bolts near the top with the impact. As we get to the bolts on the bottom, due to the angle of the drive shaft, it's going to be hard to get into that, so we're going to have to switch that over to a handheld socket. So starting with the top bolts, you're going to remove them. If you do have a vehicle lift or you jack your vehicle up, it makes it a little bit easier because you're able to rotate the drive shaft and bring the bolts to you to be able to undo. But do keep in mind, if you do jack up your vehicle, make sure you chalk your tires because with removing any component of the drive shaft, you're risking the vehicle rolling. Don't rely on your transmission or your emergency brake when you're doing that. Make sure you do chalk your tires. All right, now we're going to switch over. Now that we're at the last 3 bolts, which are at the bottom, we're going to switch over to a smaller socket just so that we can reach in there. So what I'm going to use is still the 8mm socket, but I'm using a small socket wrench, as you can see, and that's just so that we can get up into the angle and the socket and the socket wrench will fit. So to use a little bit of leverage, since these are on a little tight, I'm just going to take one of the extensions that we just had on, and I'm going to add that to the end of the handle here, just to kind of give you some leverage. And that should give you enough leverage to break these bolts free, and then just be a matter of time kind of ratcheting them out. Kind of the cramped space with this smaller socket, I'm going to go ahead and remove that socket. I'm going to use an 8mm ratchet to ratchet it out the rest of the way. Actually, I should be able to get it with just turning it with my fingers. Again, just switching from the smaller socket to the small ratchet. If you have a small swivel socket, you should be able to not have to switch back and forth between all of these different sockets and wrenches, but I do not. I only have a bigger socket that we used earlier, and I'm unable to get that to fit into these bottom ones with the space constraints. So it's a little bit time consuming, but it can still be done. All right, on to the last one. All right, now that we got all bolts from the back end of the front drive shaft where the Rizeppa joint is, now that we have them removed, we're going to go ahead and move to the front of the Jeep, which is where the front end of the front drive shaft is. That's the next step that we're going to remove those bolts from. All right, now we are near the front end of the Jeep, specifically the front of the drive shaft. We just took off the back part of the Rizeppa joint. Now we're going to move to taking off these 4 bolts that are connecting the front end on. But before we do that, we're going to take our bungee and we're going to go ahead and bungee and secure this in for when we remove this, it doesn't come crashing down onto us. So depending on the size of your bungee cord, you might have to wrap it a few times to ensure that it will stretch. And then you can pretty much just, it's not a heavy weight, so you can pretty much just attach it to anything sturdy up above the drive shaft. Alright, sorry about that. Had a slight camera issue. So we're back underneath the Jeep. Right now we're going to be taking off the 4 bolts that are mounting the forward part of the front drive shaft. Again, we have it bungeed to keep it from falling down, since we've already disconnected the back end where the Rizeppa joint is. We'll take my impact with my 15 millimeter socket to remove these 4 bolts. If the 15 millimeter, or excuse me, if the impact gun is not able to power off these because they are pretty stuck on, might have to switch to my handheld ratchet just to give it a little bit more torque. All right, now that we're on to the last bolt, just remember if sometimes this can be seized on to this flange, but if it's not seized on when you do release this last bolt, it could drop. That's why we have this bungee here, but if you don't bungee it, just be prepared to support it in some way. Alright, now that the drive shaft is disconnected from this end, it's now fully disconnected from the Jeep. So we're now basically going to bring it down from the Jeep and take it over to replace that Rizeppa joint. Alright, now that we have the drive shaft removed from the Jeep, just find a working surface or a bench where you can we can do the rest of the install. The next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking off this old Rizeppa joint from the drive shaft. To do that, first we're going to remove this plate, then we're going to remove a wire tie that's holding on the boot, and then we should be able to remove a snap ring or split ring, and then this should remove from the drive shaft. So first, to remove this plate, it's just pressed on. It can be a little difficult to remove, so you just want to take a screwdriver or flathead with your dead blow hammer and just kind of start knocking around. And it should start to create a crack like this for you, where you'll be able to get a screwdriver in there and work the plate off. As you can see here, it's just a bunch of old, grimy, debris-filled grease. You can set that aside. We'll end up discarding that. Next step, take your split ring pliers. And right inside here, there's going to be a split ring. You're basically just going to get your pliers in there. Remove that, just like so. Set that aside. We will not be needing that later. All right, next up, we're going to be removing this wire tie that's holding the boot onto the drive shaft. Basically just cinching it down to prevent any debris or anything getting in. This was actually one of the first telltale signs that I knew something was wrong with my with this old Rizeppa joint. The first thing I noticed was underneath the car there was a lot of grease sprayed where the Rizeppa joint sits. And then there was actually not a wire tie on it. So this was a wire tie that I put aftermarket. Hoping to fix the issue, and never stopped slinging grease everywhere. So I found out that it was actually this boot that was dry rotted and had holes in it, which I'll show you once I get it off. But that was the issue, causing all the grease to leak out. Once the grease leaks out from this, it can cause a lot of problems. It's metal on metal, so you need to have that grease in there at all times. So to remove this wire tie, it's just like any plastic wire tie. Just going to get a pair of snips in there. Wherever you can, and we're going to be snipping that off. Just have a rag handy because it does get pretty greasy. This step and a few more steps ahead. All right, so now that we have the split ring off, we have that wire tie holding the boot off, we should be able to fairly easily slide this off with a dead blow hammer. And here it goes. And as you can see here, I may have just done that tear, but deep inside here there are some tears in the boot. What basically happens is it just dry rots this rubber, creating these holes in it. It allows all this grease to get out, which is a problem. But as you can see inside here, this is the gear and the bearings inside there. There's not much grease in there because most of it has already leaked out. So we're going to set that aside. Obviously, we're not going to be needing that since we have a new one from Mammoth that we're going to be putting on. But I'm going to take my rag and I'm going to come down here to the drive shaft where that Mazeppa joint was just sitting, and I'm just going to kind of wipe it off, wipe some of that old dirty grease off, and just ensure we have a good spot to be putting the new one back on. All right, now in your kit from Mammoth, you're going to have a few different things. You're going to have a new boot. You're going to have that shield, and then additionally, you're going to have the actual bearing and ball bearings in there as well. You're going to have a new split ring, and you're going to have a series of new screws. So those old screws that we removed from the Jeep earlier on the Mazeppa seal, we can push aside. We won't be reinstalling those. We won't need those. Additionally, you're going to have two little gaskets that are going to be provided, as well as a small little number 6 Allen key that Mammoth provides. We will use that for the install. That is what these new bolts use. And then you're going to have a new wire tie to wire tie this boot on. Additionally, you're going to have a pack of grease. It's going to come in the kit from Mammoth. So the next step that we're going to do is basically going to apply that grease. So you want to take the grease packet they provide, and the way we're going to work this is basically you're going to press some grease onto the new gear, and you're going to push it in with the palms of your hand, working your way around. It's going to get very messy, but you want to make sure you're using all of the grease that they provide. So you're going to be anticipate using the entire packet. And we're going to flip it over. Same thing on the other side. Just pressing that grease as well as you can into these ball bearings. You may get a little grease on the inside that slips onto the end of the drive shaft here. If you do, just kind of grab it with your fingers, put it back over where the ball bearings are right here on this little ring, so that we can ensure the grease gets into where it's supposed to go. All right, now that we've done that, you will inevitably get grease all around here, including into the holes where the bolts go. If you do, it's good to go ahead and remove those now. The way I'm going to do that is just use a little rolled up piece of paper, and I'm basically going to push it through one end and out the other. That removes most of the grease from the hole. It's not going to remove all of it, which is fine. It's inevitable, it's going to happen, but at least we'll remove most of it. If you get huge clumps of it coming out of these holes, just grab it and kind of push it over there to where the ball bearings are. Now that we got those holes cleaned out, I'm just going to take a rag and kind of clean off the surface of the joint, just so there's not any kind of stray grease where we don't want it. All right, now that we got that, my glove tore, so I'm going to go ahead and place that. All right. Next, we're going to be assembling the rest of the Mazeppa joint. So this is the new boot that comes in the kit. If you get it and your boot is kind of turned inside out, like mine was, just flip it back. If you need a reference, you can look at your old one and just make sure that it looks similar. All right, so one thing to note, there's two different sides to this Mazeppa joint. That's indicated right here on the edge. Notice how this edge right here kind of has a little bit of the metal machined away. That is the side that we are going to be attaching this plate to once we get it onto there. So just remember, that side is the plate side. This side is going to be the boot side. So the first thing we can do, we can go ahead and slide the boot on to the drive shaft. Just kind of twisting it until it gets seated right there where it's supposed to go. Then we're going to take one of the gaskets that they provide and just kind of set it on the drive shaft for now. It's not going to be positioned properly, and it's probably going to fall while we're going through this, but we'll reposition it here in a minute. And we're going to be now putting on the actual joint. Remember, this side that has a machined edge on it is going to be facing towards you. It's going to be facing this way because that's where that plate is going to go against. So once you get it lined up with the gears there, we're going to be hitting it on. And one thing that I do just to try to keep most of the grease inside, because you're going to be hitting this, is just trying to place a plastic bag over it like so. This is just as you're hitting it, keep the grease from clumping up on your hammer and then slinging everywhere, and then you're losing a lot of grease. So it's going to take a few good hits to get it seated properly. Just check your bag. If you have a lot of huge clumps of grease on it, you can just kind of wipe those off and put them back onto the gear. All right, the next step, we're going to be installing a split ring that comes in the kit. So that split ring, just like we took the old one off, is going to go right on the edge of the drive shaft. And you should hear it click right into place. Just press to ensure that it is seated properly. All right, next we're going to be putting on the this metal plate. Before we do that, we're going to be putting this seal on that is provided in the kit. But in order to do that, the best practice that I found is let's go ahead and put a couple of the bolts in on opposite ends just to kind of help guide us. You may need to twist your boot just to align with the holes. I'm just going to put in 4 bolts for now. It's just going to help us guide on the seal. So both these seals seat the same way. They basically sit inside the bolts and have little notches where the bolts go. So now I'm going to go ahead and put a few of the other bolts in. Now also, when putting in these bolts, you want to ensure that the washers that it comes with are seated properly as well. They kind of go in parallel with the curvature of this joint. So if it's backwards, the holes aren't going to line up. You're going to know immediately that something's not right. It's probably the direction of these washers. So notice how this seal is kind of sitting inside of the bolts. In a second, we're going to be looking at this seal that we put in earlier once we get this plate on, but I'm not going to do that yet until I get the plate on and it holds this side in. So you want to apply the plate, ensure that the bolts are coming through the hole and kind of holding you in the right spot. And then while holding all this together, just give a quick tap just to ensure that we pop that plate onto that edge so it'll hold. All right. Now what you're going to do is just very lightly pull out the boot end and just kind of look in there and make sure that that seal that you put in properly, or you put in, is seated properly. Just make sure it's not heavily bunched up or bunched up at all. If you were very light when you're doing all this kind of stuff, there's a very low chance that it bunched up. These seals are great because they're kind of meant to fall into place around the bolt. So it looks good. So now what we're going to do, kind of hold these bolts in place where they are, and we're going to apply this wire tie. So to apply it, basically you just want to wrap it around a couple of times because it is pretty long. I'm only going to wrap it around twice, although it could probably go a third time. Once I get that wrapped around, I'm going to take my needle nose pliers. It should just give it a really good pull.
could also just kind of grab hold of them with the pliers like this, and using this drive shaft, give yourself a little bit of leverage to pull. But if you don't have the special tool to tighten these, that's okay. Using these pliers has always worked just fine for me. Alright, now that we got that tightened down, you'll notice that there are two small little tabs on either side that we're just going to kind of hammer down to hold this into place. And you can come back with a like a ball peen hammer if you need it, just to kind of crimp down those. Just be careful not to do any damage to the rubber on that boot. Once we get that tightened down, any excess, just grab your snips. And just snip off. I'm just going to hammer down a little bit, sticking up, so we don't cut ourselves. Alright, now we got the new Rizeppa joint from Mammoth, fully assembled and mounted onto our drive shaft. The next step from here is going to be mounting it back onto the Jeep. To do that, all we're going to need is the 15mm socket from earlier to attach the front end with the 4 bolts, and then we're going to need the number 6 Allen key that's provided in the kit to attach these bolts to the Rizeppa side. So we're going to grab our drive shaft, going to grab our tools, we're going to head back under the Jeep. Alright, now we're back under the Jeep. We have a Rizeppa joint fully installed onto the drive shaft, so now we're just going to further install the drive shaft back on to the Jeep. To do that, you have to very carefully, same as we took it down, just lift the drive shaft up. Being careful, if you can, to keep all those bolts into the Rizeppa joint. Best you can. We're going to lift it and feed it underneath the Jeep. The best we can. Now when you get it close to being in the proper position, what I like to do is go ahead and install my bungee back. It's just going to help hold a lot of this weight from this. Kind of lift it above where it connects so I can really tighten down on that bungee. Now that we got the bungee tightened on the front end of it, we're now going to transition over to the Rizeppa side. That's the side that we're going to bolt down first before coming back and installing these 4 bolts. All right, now we're back to the Rizeppa joint side. And basically, we're going to be reinstalling all of these 8 bolts back into the flange here. Again, we're going to need the number 6 Allen key that Mammoth provides in the kit, as well as all of the previously used extensions and swivels that we used to take off the old Rizeppa joint. You'll still need that just due to the location of these bolts. One thing I like to do is as I'm lifting this up to guide it into this flange, you can kind of hand tighten some of these bolts, and that'll kind of help you hold it in place as well as line it up perfectly, because it is going to be a little difficult to get in there. Once we get a couple of them hand tightened, once we get all of them kind of in their holes and hand tighten a few threads,
we'll then get the impact to drive them in the rest of the way. Now that we have it disconnected, so you should be able to freely turn this. That'll help you with lining up these holes. This is one of the reasons that I like to start with this Rzepa side when reinstalling it, is because it gives me the ability to rotate this and get to all the screws a lot easier. Now I'm going to go back and just make sure that all the bolts are pretty tight. Alright, now we've got all 8 bolts on the Rzepa side tightened down to the flange. We're now going to move back forward to the front end of the drive shaft and attach those 4 bolts. Alright, now we're back up in the front end of the Jeep and the front side of the drive shaft. We're going to be installing these 4 bolts back into this flange in the front. This is the last step we have on this project. Now, we did remove the original bolts from this, and we're going to be reinstalling the original bolts back in. The new bolts that came with the kit from Mammoth already had some thread locker ingrained into the threads, but since we're reusing these, it had thread locker on it. I broke those free and getting the bolts out. All right, I have my thread locker applied to one of these bolts. I'm just going to go one at a time to ensure that I can get it lined up and everything. Because we started with the Rzepa joint side, this still freely rotates, which is going to definitely help us out when we're aligning these holes. Depending on how tight you have your bungee cord, like I have, it's pretty tight. I'm just going to go ahead and release one end to kind of let it kind of slowly drop in. And as I get a hole lined up, I'm going to go ahead and put one bolt in. Just use my fingers to tighten it for now. And that should be enough to hold it in place for now. I'm going to go ahead and put some thread locker on the next bolt and feed that next bolt into the next lined hole. I'm going to go ahead and bolt these in a little bit, but not all the way yet. Alright, and the
Final 2 bolts, I'm going to go ahead and thread locker and insert those. All right, now that we got all 4 of these bolts attached, I'm going to make sure to remove my bungee cord. All right, and we are now complete with installing, replacing a Mammoth Rizeppa joint onto a 2015 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited.
So that is going to wrap it up for my review and the install of this Mammoth Rizeppa CV joint kit fitting all 2007 through 2018 JK Wranglers, and you can find this right here at extremeterrain.com.